This is a graduate case study for the Natural Resource Consensus course at Oregon State University, winter quarter 2022. My name is Elaine George. The focus of my graduate case study is the Southwest Jemez Mountains Collaboration and their forest landscape restoration project in the state of New Mexico. On this slide, the regional and landscape scale of the collaboration are found and delineated in the map with the green outline. The red outline is the site of a large-scale wildfire that happened in the past. The project scale includes the Santa Fe National Forest and the Valles Caldera National Refuge in Sandoval County. The project area is approximately 210,000 acres, and the collaboration project planning and initiation began in 2009. I would like to start with a brief review of the forest history of the area. The time period is from the 1800s through the 1900s, which was a time of expansion into the western United States, and much development and deforestation was occurring. Primarily, the Santa Fe National Forest and the Valles Caldera area were used for logging, cattle ranching, sheep grazing, and one of the main components, as with other places in the western United States during those periods of settlement, was fire suppression. Historically, the Santa Fe National Forest was established in 1915. The watershed consists primarily of the Rio Grande River, which has two sub-basins, the Santa Fe River and the Rio Chama River. The Valles Caldera National Refuge was established more recently in the year 2000. The watershed consists of the Jemez River. The Southwest Jemez Mountains Collaboration planning phase started in 2009 and extended through 2010. There had been a pre-planning phase and activities related to that aspect between 2007 and 2008. The impetus for the collaboration was the climate risk assessment conducted by the state of New Mexico in the year 2008. There also had been previous wildfires which caused extensive damage, and in general, the areas being studied had a high wildfire risk. The goals for the project were to improve forest resilience from wildfires and other disturbances caused by human beings, to protect the watersheds from grazing and other activities. There were a few objectives that are based upon the New Mexico forest restoration principles: reduce the risk of severe wildfire, restore natural fire regimes, increase the forest diversity and old growth characteristics. The old growth characteristics had been part of the landscape since before the 1800s. Improve fish and wildlife habitat, improve water quality and watershed functions, mitigate climate change impacts, preserve heritage resources and cultural archaeological sites, utilize wood products. On the right side of the slide, the general summary of the collaboration itself and the stakeholder representation. The government and tribes had 17 representative groups. These consisted of federal, state, and municipal agencies, as well as 2 tribes, the Santa Clara Pueblo and the Jemez Pueblo. Non-government representation included NGOs, universities, other educational institutions, volunteer groups, and the NGOs were distributed among wildlife groups most importantly. The proposed term for the collaboration itself and the forest restoration project was from 2010 through 2019. This slide is a breakdown of the financial planning summary and funding allocations from federal and state and partner sources. And this was prepared as part of the original funding proposal between 2009 and 2010. So taking a quick look at the figures, there's a concise breakdown, and the total at the bottom, it's over $200 million funded for this collaboration over that 10-year period. On this slide, we're going to take a look at the southwestern forest type breakdown for the Santa Fe National Forest. The Valles Caldera area is similar. So now we're going to go into the nuts and bolts of forestry in the area. So on the left we have the forest types: pinyon juniper, ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, white fir, spruce and fir, Engelmann spruce, deciduous woodland oak, aspen, juniper, lumber pine, blue spruce, and cottonwood. And we see along the x-axis the percent forest land that each of these forest types exist in. On this slide, the landscape conditions prior to implementation of the collaboration plan are listed. Firstly, there's a high density of trees in many of the areas. The trees, as you see in the photograph on the right, they're narrow diameter, and they have a closed canopy with crowns in very close contact, which creates a high risk of ground fires in the event that a wildfire does occur. The open canopy historically was 75% in the forest, and now it's 3%. So that's a very big difference, and it's a high risk difference. Generally, the trees are middle-aged, 60 to 80 years. And there's also, through surveys and inventory analysis, notable reduced tree species diversity. And the trees that are there are small, fire-intolerant trees. Therefore, this leads to back to the serious risk of large and increased wildfires, including ground fires. Old growth, which was characteristic in these areas prior to the 1800s, is significantly reduced, as are the meadow areas, the aspen trees, and the natural understory. One issue with the closed canopy and the crowns on these small diameter trees in dense stands is that when it snows in the winter, the snow does not reach the soil surface. Hence, the conditions of the soil are increasingly arid. Another problem in this project area are reduced wildlife habitats, and that again is evidenced by State of New Mexico wildlife surveys in terms of populations, and that does include the endangered species in those areas. The riparian habitats, as we know from the previous slides about the watersheds, they're degraded, and that's in terms of water quality, erosion, invasive plant species, and generally a depleted habitat. There are other invasive plant invasions such as cheatgrass outside of the watershed. And then we also have the problem in the Santa Fe National Forest and the Valles Caldera Refuge of bark beetle outbreaks. On this slide on the left, you see a list of priorities for implementation of the Forest Collaboration Plan. Firstly, the restoration efforts would be conducted over larger areas for cost efficiency. Next, restoration treatments were designed for the ecosystem, not for wood product output. Third, tree cutting and harvesting was to be tailored to variable landscape conditions. It would not be a one-size-fits-all approach. Wood utilization would be provided for local communities in which the surrounding area outside of Santa Fe, the capital, is generally a depressed economy. Increase local jobs and training and enhance business opportunities in the area. Reduce wildfire risk, importantly, with treatments around the community areas of the wildland-urban interface. Next, highlight public outreach and engagement for the local community. And lastly, prioritize cultural preservation of archaeological sites. On the right side of the slide, you see tree species that were to be harvested. Typically, they were less than 16 inches diameter at breast height, so these are not large trees, or not large diameter trees. We have the ponderosa pine, represents the most, or the highest percentile of planned harvests or thins. Douglas fir, 15 to 20%, white fir, 15 to 20%, and then the remaining tree species would be averaging about 5% harvest and or thinning. Collaboration accomplishments were significant over the 9 to 10 year period of time for the initial collaboration. There were 57,000 or 27% of acres treated of the original 210,000 planned for management. 24,000 acres of wildland-urban interface underwent prescribed fire or prescribed burns, in addition to management of 3 wildfires during that period of time between 2010 and 2019. So there were 3 wildfires, 2011, 2013, and 2017, while the forest restoration process was ongoing. 10,000 acres of forest were thinned. 1,000 out of 4,500 cultural sites were protected with thinning and stabilization. Regarding the riparian habitat, there were 6 miles of the corridor restored, and 100 acres of wetlands were restored or created. There were 24,000 trees planted along the riparian corridor and watersheds. 200 acres of invasive plants and weeds were treated and or removed. Greater than 300 jobs were created during that period of time. 50 miles out of 100 miles of roads have been decommissioned, and 7 beaver dam analogs were installed along the watersheds. In 2020 and 2021, there were 2 wildfires, generally small scale compared to some of the large fires that have taken place. 2020, about 1,600 acres were burned, and in 2021, 3,500 acres were burned. My interpretation of this is that the effects of the forest restoration and collaboration planning may be showing some results in that these wildfires were not extensive and did not cause as much damage as they possibly could have in terms of acreage. No structures were burned during those two wildfires. On the right in the photo is the decommissioned road, just one example of some of the accomplishments during the 2010 to 2019 period. The current slide is intended to highlight the accomplishments from the forest restoration project in collaboration of the previous slide. On the left is a map showing the color-coded project areas, and on the right is the key to the treatment strategies or treatment and management procedures that were undertaken for those areas. In summary, over 40 stakeholders from various federal, state, and municipal agencies, as well as NGOs, university personnel, and tribes were involved in the initial planning phase of the collaboration from 2009 to 2010. Those same stakeholders remain committed to the project, forest restoration, throughout the duration of the period from 2010 to 2019. Highlighted are the ecological improvements, economic improvements, and social and cultural aspects that were created by the forest restoration and the long-term commitment. The final slide is a list of references used for the case study of the Southwest Jemez Collaboration Project.